I have dedicated my professional career to the study and control of arthropods.
Okay, I think I've pretty much covered the background information in the last 5 parts. I think a total of 10 videos. I think that's probably enough background. I can get to some of the cool stuff. And I'm going to talk about hermaphrodites. That's right, hermaphrodites. I'm something of an expert on hermaphrodites. Not that I am one. I don't even know one. But that's actually my master's degree was, as I mentioned, is the sexual biology of Caridean shrimps, and specifically a hermaphroditic species is where the actual my target was on. And because of that, I had to study hermaphroditism in plants, animals, throughout biology. Read all of the relevant literature, know as much as I could possibly know about it. And so I became quite an expert on the whole topic, which is a fun topic. One of the things I want to talk about, hermaphrodite in common usage refers to, like most people think of hermaphrodite, they think of a mutation, a human being, a baby that's born with male and female sex organs. Typically, in those cases, the doctors choose, or the parents choose, which sex they want the child to be, and the other things are surgically removed. In many cases, things like hormone therapy are utilized later on, just so the child develops normal into the sex that they picked for it. But reality, hermaphroditism is a lot more complex than that. Yes, it's true. There are birth defects that result in hermaphroditism, but there's also whole groups of species. Plants are almost universally hermaphroditic, in at least many groups. So that's something we see that you see that a lot, and where hermaphroditism isn't a mutation, it's just the standard thing. But one thing people miss or don't quite get, there's a lot of misinformation about it. Is this idea that people think that a hermaphrodite is something that has male and female function at the same time, and that doesn't have to be the case. That's something that's I don't think properly understood. Actually, more common in hermaphrodites in the animal kingdom, at the very least, is that they are male for part of their life and then female for another part of their life. Sex changers. A hermaphrodite has to have male and female function during some portion of its life. Okay, it doesn't have to be at the same time. So kind of keep that in mind. Again, these terms are important to define. This is probably going to be several parts because I got a lot to say about these things. One of the things about sex changers, for example, one of the things about it is you look at mammals, for example, don't change sex. We are now medically able to do such a thing, although it's not a true sex change. It's a cosmetic sex change. But we can't really change sexes. It just doesn't happen in us because it has to do with how specialized our sexual morphology is. But a lot of species don't have that kind of specialized morphology. If you look at shrimp, back to my area of expertise, they have, instead of having what we would define in other species, in gonads, testes or ovaries, they actually have a single structure that's called an ovotestes, meaning that it develops, embryologically, it develops into sort of an undifferentiated tissue type, and then due to hormones that are released in development, becomes testes or becomes ovaries. Actually, mammals do the similar thing, although it's a little bit more complex. But what this means is that the ovotestes in shrimp, in crustacea actually, can go either way. If you switch the hormones, if you actually artificially change the hormones in a crustacean, you can cause a testes to revert into an ovary, for example. So sex change is a little bit simpler in these species, and the reason why, and this is really cool, it's called the size advantage hypothesis. It's awesome. Is that, and remember I talked earlier, sperm's cheap. Okay, the sperm cells themselves are small. They're able to be produced in large quantities. So a tiny itty bitty shrimp can produce more than enough sperm to fertilize a large female. Does that make sense? It doesn't. His reproductive function isn't size dependent necessarily. Female shrimp, on the other hand, because they brood their eggs, the eggs are kept on their body. The larger the female, and we're talking about a volumetric increase. So if she gets every millimeter she gets longer, there's a volumetric increase in the number of embryos that she can brood at once. So for her, it is size. Bigger is better. So for the male, what they call it, it's a decoupling of reproductive success based on size. Females, reproductive success is size dependent. Males, it's not. So as they're growing, they start off as little larvae, a little small. They mature into a form, and they're tiny. It would be illogical for a female to start producing eggs when she's tiny, because she's not going to produce very many eggs, and the cost that the actual energetic cost isn't worth it. It is sort of a better investment for her to put that energy into growing big, then produce eggs once you get big. For a male, however, because they can produce tons of sperm even at a small size, there's no advantage to that. Their reproductive success is in maturing as quickly as possible, even if you're tiny, and then attempting to fertilize as many females as you can possibly get to. So in that group, because of the fact that there's this decoupling of the size, I hope I'm making sense here, would be an advantage to reproduce as a male when you're tiny. You say you're a larva, you metamorphose into the shrimp form, and then be a male for a couple of years or however long. Okay, stay male. Mate with as many females as you can. Then when you get size, then when you get big enough, then when you're big enough to make it worthwhile to produce eggs, then you change to female. Okay, so we see this with like the what we call around locally our commercial shrimp, spot prawns, all of our Alaska prawns, not the ones from just not tiger prawns or those guys. That's a different group. But our spot prawns, for example, it's called protandric hermaphrodites. So they start off they all begin life as male. Not all, but there are variations on it. But for the most part, they start off as a male when they're small, and they mate as a male for a couple of years, and then when they get big, change to female, and then they spend the rest of their lives reproducing as a female. I think that's pretty interesting. A lot of fish, sort of on the opposite end, fish they actually begin life as a female and then change to a male, because for them, the schooling fish like the wrasses, the reproductive success is geared to how big the male is to protect his little harem. So a small male is not very successful. A big male is very successful. So you see that pattern in fish. So okay, I'm gonna do a couple more parts of this because I think this is really. I promise it'll get much more interesting as I go on.